Look, I did a series in the '60s, the Big Valley Western, and then the '70s was 6 Mil, '80s was Fall Guy.
When people talk about the greatest love stories in Hollywood, they often think about young couples, glamorous weddings, and perfect red carpet moments. But very few people understand the kind of love that Lee Majors and Farrah Fawcett once shared. Their story was not simple, and it was never as perfect as magazines made it look, but it was real. It was a kind of love that begins when two people are still trying to find their place in the world, and it grows inside them even when everything around them changes. At 86 years old, Lee Majors finally opened up in a way he never had before. For years, he avoided speaking too deeply about Farrah because the memories were painful, and he felt that some emotions were better kept inside. But age has a way of softening even the toughest hearts. As he looked back, he realized he had carried certain truths inside himself for decades, truths that shaped him, hurt him, and stayed with him long after their marriage ended and long after Farrah passed away. The truth he carries is not one simple thing. It is a mix of regret, love, guilt, and a bittersweet acceptance that some relationships leave marks that time cannot erase. When they first met in the late 1960s, Lee was already a rising star, known for his handsome looks and strong on-screen presence. Farrah, on the other hand, was still at the beginning of her career. She was young, gentle, and full of life. Lee once said that when she walked into a room, it was as if the world slowed down for a second. Their chemistry was immediate, and the comfort they felt with each other was something neither of them had expected. They were drawn together in a way that felt natural and almost magical. Hollywood loved their image, the tough action star and the angelic beauty, but the real story behind that image was much deeper. They were two people trying to build a life together while being surrounded by cameras, schedules, long work hours, and constant public attention. Lee now admits that he did not fully understand how difficult it was for Farrah to be both his partner and an actress trying to build her own identity. Back then, he believed that love alone was strong enough to protect him from everything, but he now realizes that love needs space, patience, and balance. With age, he sees things much more clearly, and the truth he finally admits is one he avoided for many years. That losing Farrah was not just the end of marriage. It was the loss of the one person who truly understood him during the most important years of his life. As Lee Majors continued to reflect on those years, he shared something even more emotional. He never believed that he would spend so much of his life thinking about someone who had been gone from his world for so long. After their separation, they went in different directions, not out of hatred, but out of confusion and the pressures of fame. Farrah became a superstar almost overnight when Charlie's Angels was released. Suddenly, she was everywhere. Posters, magazines, talk shows. And while the world admired her beauty and charm, Lee was watching from a distance, feeling proud yet strangely disconnected. He admitted that one of the hardest truths to accept was that he had unintentionally held Farrah back during their marriage, not because he wanted to, but because he did not know how to handle the growing differences between them. He was already an established actor working long hours on the $6 Million Man, and Farrah's opportunities kept increasing, yet he feared losing her to the spotlight. At the time, he didn't realize that trying to protect a relationship by controlling its environment can sometimes suffocate the very person you love. Farrah wanted freedom, not from Lee, but from the tight boxes Hollywood kept putting her in. She wanted to grow, to take risks, to show the world that she was more than a pretty face. Lee now understands that she needed encouragement, not restrictions. He regrets not being the partner she needed during that period. Another painful truth he shared was that he never really stopped caring for her, even after their marriage ended. Hollywood often rumors that celebrities forget their old relationships quickly, but for Lee, that was never the case. Farrah had left a permanent impression on him. During interviews, he avoided emotional questions about her because he feared he might break down or say something he couldn't take back. He rarely talked about their private life because he believed it belonged only to them, but deep inside, he knew he had unfinished emotions that he never resolved. When Farrah became involved with Ryan O'Neal, Lee kept his distance. He had moved on with his life, remarried, and tried to focus on new chapters. But a small part of him always wondered how things might have turned out if he had been more patient, more understanding, or more supportive when Farrah needed him. What hurt him the most, however, was the fact that he and Farrah lost touch for many years, not because they hated each other, but because they never learned how to communicate again after so much emotional pain. As he looks back now, Lee says the distance between them was a wound that never fully healed. He carries the heavy truth that sometimes the people you love the most are the ones you fail to understand at the right moment. As Lee Majors continued to open up about his past with Farrah Fawcett, he revealed a truth that he had kept inside for most of his life. The moment he realized he had truly lost her was not the day she moved out, not the day their divorce papers were signed, and not even the day she became a global icon on her own. Instead, the realization came many years later, during a quiet evening when he stumbled upon an old interview of hers on television. She looked radiant, confident, and independent, everything he always knew she could be. She spoke in a calm and warm voice, and she smiled with the same brightness he had fallen in love with so many years earlier. But what hit him hardest was the serious look in her eyes whenever she talked about her struggles. In that moment, Lee felt something break inside him. He understood that while the world had always seen Farrah as the poster-perfect Hollywood star, she had been fighting battles he never fully saw, or perhaps never allowed himself to see. He admitted that during their marriage, he was often too busy, too focused on work, and too overwhelmed by the growing pressures of fame to truly listen to her needs. Farrah was young, sensitive, and still learning how to protect her own heart. She needed someone who could guide her gently, stand beside her, and allow her to shine. Lee, however, had been raised in a tough environment where emotions were rarely discussed. He loved her, but he did not always know how to express that love in ways that made her feel safe. The devastating truth he finally shared was this: he had been so afraid of losing Farrah to Hollywood that he unknowingly pushed her away. Instead of being her safe place, he became part of the stress she was trying to escape. Looking back, he realizes that the growing emotional distance between them was not caused by one big fight or one specific moment. It was caused by many small things that slowly built up over time. A missed dinner, a long filming schedule, a jealous misunderstanding, or a hurried conversation could have seemed minor on their own, but together they formed a wall neither of them knew how to break through. Lee now understands that relationships, especially in Hollywood, need trust more than anything else. But during those years, he struggled with trust. He feared the attention Farrah was getting. He feared the producers, actors, and photographers who surrounded her. He feared the fame that was lifting her career, but making him feel left behind. Instead of admitting these fears, he kept them inside, and they turned into distance. Farrah, who was gentle and full of heart, felt that distance stronger than anyone realized. Years after their separation, Lee occasionally heard news about Farrah's career. He watched from afar as she transitioned from a TV star to a respected actress, taking on serious roles that showed her true talent. He felt proud, even though he never told her. He also kept silent during the difficult moment of her life, including her personal struggles, because he believed it was no longer his place to interfere. But as he grew older, he realized that love does not disappear just because people grow apart. It changes shape, but it remains. The most painful truth he admitted was that he missed her long before she was gone. He missed their private jokes, their quiet evenings, and the simple comfort of knowing that someone understood him without needing explanations. He missed the version of himself he was when he was with her, a softer, happier version that he rarely showed the world. What truly broke him, however, was when Farrah became ill. He stayed silent out of respect and distance, but inside he was devastated. When she passed away in 2009, he felt a grief he never expected. It was not only grief for the woman he once loved. It was grief for the years they lost, the conversations they never had, and the healing they never got to share. At 86, Lee admitted that losing Farrah was one of the deepest emotional wounds of his life, a wound time never fully healed. As Lee Majors continued speaking about Farrah Fawcett, he revealed another truth that had stayed buried for many years. He never realized how much Farrah had shaped him until long after she was gone. During their marriage, he had been focused on his own work, his career, and the constant pressure to maintain his reputation as one of television's biggest stars. He often believed that emotions were something to be managed quietly, hidden behind a strong exterior. This was the way he had lived since childhood, and it became his natural habit, even in his closest relationships. But Farrah was different. She lived with her heart open. She was sensitive, expressive, and full of warmth. She could walk into a room and make everyone feel comfortable, even when she was nervous herself. Lee admitted that he did not fully understand the side of her at the time. He loved her beauty and admired her spirit, but he never realized how deeply she felt things and how much she needed emotional support while navigating the intense spotlight of Hollywood. Looking back, he says he wishes he had listened more, talked more, and protected her more, not from the world, but from the loneliness that came with fame as years passed. Lee began to understand that Farrah had been a far more important influence on him than he had ever admitted. She taught him patience, softness, and the importance of slowing down to appreciate life beyond work and celebrity. These lessons did not hit him all at once. They revealed themselves slowly, like pieces of a puzzle, showing him a part of himself he had ignored. When he watched old clips of Farrah after her passing, interviews, photos, movies, he felt a strange mix of pain and gratitude. Pain because he realized how much he had taken for granted, and gratitude because he was lucky enough to have shared his life with her during some of his most important years. He said that even though their marriage ended, the emotional bond between them never truly disappeared. It simply transformed into something quiet, distant, but deeply meaningful. Another truth Lee admitted was that he always hoped, deep inside, that he and Farrah would reconnect one day, not as lovers, but as old friends who could look back and smile at everything they had survived. He imagined meeting her for a simple lunch, sharing stories, laughing about their wild Hollywood days, and letting go of any old misunderstandings. He dreamed of telling her that he was proud of her, that he respected her strength, and that he understood now what he had been too young and too confused to understand back then. But life, he realized, does not always give people a chance to fix what was broken. By the time he considered reaching out, Farrah was already fighting for her life. Her illness came suddenly, and the news spread quickly. Lee kept his distance, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't want to intrude on a painful and private moment. He believed it was better to respect the space she needed than to show up and reopen old wounds. Yet, as he watched from afar, he felt helpless. Farrah had always been strong, but the battle she fought in her final years was one of the hardest he had ever witnessed. It reminded him of how fragile life really is, even for someone who had once seemed unstoppable. In interviews today, Lee says that the truth he finally accepts is this: Farrah was a great love of his early life, and nothing, not time, not distance, not new marriages, ever changed that. He does not claim they were perfect. He does not pretend they didn't make mistakes. But what they had was real, powerful, and unforgettable. Losing her, in the end, felt like losing a piece of his own history. At 86, he speaks about her with a tenderness that shows just how deeply she is still rooted in his heart. The devastating truth, he says, is not just that she is gone. It is that he did not realize how much she meant to him until it was too late. In the later years of his life, Lee Major began to speak more openly about the emotional impact Farrah Fawcett had left on him, and in doing so, he revealed a truth that many people never expected to hear. He explained that even though he went on to have new relationships, new marriages, and an entirely new chapter of life, a part of his heart always stayed connected to the time he shared with Farrah. He said it wasn't because he was stuck in the past, or because he didn't love again, but because certain people carry a special meaning that cannot be replaced. Farrah was that person for him. She represented youth, discovery, excitement, and emotional growth. She was the woman who walked with him during some of the most important years of his life, when he was trying to become the man the world expected him to be. She was there during his rise to fame, during his moment of self-doubt, and during the times when he didn't believe he was enough. And even though their marriage did not survive the pressure of fame and the misunderstandings between them, the emotional imprint she left on him survived everything. Lee admitted that one of the most devastating truths he carries is the realization that he never apologized to Farrah in the way he wished he had. He said that during their marriage, he acted out of fear, insecurity, and a belief that a man should not show weakness. He had grown up in a world where emotions were seen as a sign of vulnerability, and he took that mindset with him into adulthood. But Farrah did not want him to be perfect. She wanted him to be open. She wanted communication, understanding, and a partnership built on trust rather than silence. Looking back, Lee realizes that his silence, though unintentional, created emotional gaps that were difficult to repair. He wishes he had told her more often that he admired her talent, that he was proud of her, and that he understood her dreams. He wishes he had asked her how she felt instead of assuming that everything was fine. He wishes he had stood beside her more instead of expecting her to adjust to his world. He said that after Farrah passed away. He often replayed memories of their early years together. Simple moments like cooking dinner, taking quiet walks, or laughing about something silly. These memories became more precious than the glamorous events or Hollywood parties. The quiet moments were where their real relationship lived, and Lee now understands that those moments were more meaningful than anything the world saw on camera. He admitted that the older he got, the more he learned to appreciate small, gentle memories that once seemed ordinary. It was only with age that he realized how extraordinary they actually were. One truth he shared is that Farrah had a softness that balances toughness. She brought warmth to his life in a way no one else ever had. When they were together, he felt grounded, even when the world around them was chaotic. And although they drifted apart, the emotional connection they once had never completely disappeared. It simply faded into the background of their lives, waiting in silence as time moved on. Lee also spoke about something he rarely admitted publicly. He always hoped that one day, Farrah would write a message, send a letter, or reach out in some unexpected way. Not to rekindle their romance, but to reconnect as two people who once meant the world to each other. He imagined that maybe they could talk again, share stories, and finally close the chapters they left unfinished. But life took them down different paths, and the moment he hoped for never came. When Farrah died, the finality of it hit him with a force he was not prepared for. It became clear to him that some emotions, some regrets, and some memories never get the chance to be resolved. They simply become part of who you are. AT86. Lee describes Farrah not as a mistake or a heartbreak, but as a blessing that came into his life too early for him to fully appreciate. The devastating truth he carries is not just that she is gone, but that he spent too many years believing there would always be time. Time to talk, time to reconnect, time to heal. But time, he now understands, waits for no one as Lee Majors continued to reflect on his long and complicated relationship with Farrah Fawcett. He shared another emotional truth, one that revealed how deeply their story shaped his understanding of love, loss, and forgiveness. He explained that as he grew older, especially after turning 80, he began to look at life differently. Fame, success, money, and achievements no longer carried the same weight they once did. What mattered now were the people who had touched his heart, the memories that brought him joy or sadness, and the lessons he learned along the way. Farrah was at the top of that list. Lee admitted that for many years, he avoided thinking too much about the past because it was painful. Remembering Farrah brought both happiness and regret, and dealing with those mixed emotions was not easy. But with time, he realized that avoiding the past does not erase it. Instead, it quietly follows you, waiting for the moment when you are finally ready to face it. For Lee, that moment came later in life, when he had the space and clarity to truly understand what she meant to him. That he said that one of the hardest truths he finally accepted was that he spent too much of his life trying to be strong in the wrong way. In Hollywood, he was known for his tough, heroic image, the kind of man who never showed weakness, never cried, and never doubted himself. But real strength, he admits now, is not about hiding emotions. Real strength is about facing them. During his marriage to Farrah, he struggled to open up. He tried to protect her by being firm and controlled, believing it would keep their relationship safe. But instead, it created emotional distance. He now understands that Farrah needed him to be honest, vulnerable, and expressive, qualities he never learned to show. He wishes he had known back then that love is not something you guard behind walls. It is something you share openly, even when it scares you. Lee also revealed that Farrah's illness changed him in a profound way. When he heard the news that she was battling a rare and aggressive cancer, he felt a deep sadness he had not experienced in years. He said it was like a quiet voice inside him whispering that life was giving him one last chance to feel things he had buried. Although he kept his distance to respect her private struggle, he prayed for her, thought about her often, and hoped she knew how many people loved her. Watching her fight so bravely reminded him of the gentle strength she always carried. Farrah had a way of remaining graceful even in the most painful moments. Her courage, he said, made him rethink what it means to face hardship. She taught him, even in her final years, that dignity, hope, and resilience are far more powerful than physical strength. Another truth he shared was that losing Farrah made him reconsider the way he approached relationships. After her death, he became more open, more patient, and more willing to express his feelings to the people he cared about. He learned to say, "I'm sorry" more easily, to forgive quickly, and to appreciate every moment. Farrah's memory became a quiet guide in his heart, helping him live more gently and honestly. He said that sometimes the greatest lessons in life come from the people you lose. Farrah was one of those people. She taught him things he did not fully understand until he was much older, but once he understood them, they changed him forever. He also admitted that even though decades passed after their divorce, he never stopped wondering what Farrah thought of him during her later years. He hoped she looked back on their relationship with some warmth, even if it came with pain. He hoped she remembered the good moments, the laughter, the adventures, the dreams they once shared. And he hoped that, despite everything, she knew he had loved her in the best way he knew how, even if it wasn't always the way she needed. At 86, Lee says that this simple truth, the hope that she remembered their love kindly, is something he carries in his heart every day to in the end. He realized that life is not about perfect choices or flawless relationships. It is about the people who shape you, stay in your memory, and leave footprints on your soul. Farrah Fawcett was one of those rare people for him. The devastating truth he finally admits is not only that he lost her, but that he will spend the rest of his life carrying the love, regret, and gratitude she left behind as Lee Majors continued sharing his memories. He opened up about another powerful truth, one that revealed how deeply Farrah Fawcett changed the way he understood the meaning of love long after their marriage ended. He explained that in his younger years, he believed love was something that could be protected by rules, controlled by boundaries, or strengthened by keeping a tight grip on a relationship. But with age, he realized that real love cannot be controlled. It grows, changes, and sometimes slips away even when you fight for it. He said that losing Farrah was one of the earliest and hardest lessons he learned about letting go. He had thought that their bond, their chemistry, and their shared dreams would be enough to keep them together. But as he watched her career rise and her life move in new directions, he began to understand that love is not always about holding on. It is sometimes about stepping back and allowing the other person to grow, even if it means they grow away from you. Lee admitted that Farrah's independence used to scare him. When they first married, she was soft-spoken, shy, and still finding her path. He felt protective of her, and at times, he even thought she needed him to guide her. But as her confidence grew and her career exploded, he saw a different side of her, a strong, determined woman who wanted to explore her own identity. He now realizes that rather than embracing this new side of Farrah, he felt threatened by it. It wasn't because he didn't love her, but because he didn't understand how to love someone who was learning to stand on her own. He had never been taught how to support a partner whose dreams were as big as his, and he struggled to adjust. Another heartbreaking truth Lee shared was that he and Farrah never truly had the chance to heal the emotional wounds they caused each other. After their divorce, both were trying to rebuild their lives. Farrah was exploring new acting roles and new relationships, while Lee was focused on stabilizing his own path. They lived in the same world, but in completely different circles. Every once in a while, Lee would hear stories about Farrah, sometimes good, sometimes painful, and each time he felt a quiet tug in his heart. He wondered if she was happy, if she felt supported, and if she ever looked back at their time together with warmth instead of sadness. But he never reached out. Fear held him back. Fear of rejection, fear of reopening old wounds, and fear of discovering that Farrah had moved on emotionally in ways he hadn't. One of the most emotional admissions he made was about the day he learned of Farrah's passing. He said the news hit him like a sudden shock, even though he knew she had been battling illness for years. He had kept track of her health quietly, but he never imagined that the final goodbye would come so soon. When he heard the news, he felt an unexpected wave of grief, not just for her loss, but for everything they never said to each other. He realized that the chance to apologize, the chance to express gratitude, the chance to reconnect as old friends was now gone forever. He said that this finality was one of the hardest truths he ever had to accept. Lee also explained that in the months after Farrah's death, he found himself thinking more deeply about his own life. He reflected on the choices he made, the relationships he built, and the moments he let slip away. Farrah's memory became a mirror that showed him both his strengths and his flaws. He began to cherish the small things, a kind message, a shared laugh, a moment of understanding, because he knew how quickly life can take those things away. The loss of Farrah reminded him that love is fragile, time is limited, and regret is heavy. 886. Lee Majors finally confessed that the most devastating truth of all is simple yet painful. He never stopped caring for Farrah Fawcett. Even as life pushed them apart, even as they built new worlds without each other, a piece of his heart remained with her. She was his first great love, the woman who shaped his early adulthood, and the person who taught him lessons he carries to this day. He knows now that true love does not fade with time. It simply settles quietly in your soul, waiting to be remembered. As Lee Majors reflected deeper on his past, he admitted another emotional truth, one that took him decades to understand. Farrah Fawcett had given him a kind of love he didn't fully appreciate until life taught him its real value. In his younger years, he was focused on building his career, proving himself, and maintaining the strong, dependable image the world expected. He believed success would bring happiness, and he worked tirelessly to stay at the top of the entertainment world. But behind all the fame, glitz, and attention, he later discovered that the most meaningful thing he ever had was a quiet, gentle love Farrah offered him. She wasn't just his wife. She was his partner, his support system, and the person who believed in him more deeply than anyone else. Back then, he was too busy to see it clearly. He now admits that his priorities were misplaced, and he wishes he had given her the time and emotional presence she deserved. As he grew older, Lee said he started replaying the small details of their life together, moments he once brushed aside but now understood as the true heart of their relationship. He remembers the way Farrah used to wait for him after long shooting days, how she would make simple meals even when she was tired, and how she always tried to brighten his mood with her natural warmth. These memories, he said, became more powerful than the dramatic moments or glamorous events that the public saw. They were reminders of how deeply she cared for him before fame created a wall between them. Lee admitted that in those years, he often took Farrah's kindness for granted, not intentionally, but because he believed it would always be there. He thought they had time to grow, time to fix their misunderstandings, time to rebuild their bond. He never imagined that their connection, one so strong, could be lost. Lee also opened up about the moment he began to realize how deeply Farrah had changed him. It happened years after their separation, when he found himself acting more patient, more caring, and more emotionally open in his later relationships. He realized that these changes were shaped by the lessons Farrah unknowingly taught him, lessons about listening, understanding, and appreciating someone fully. He said Farrah taught him tenderness, something he never learned growing up and never allowed himself to practice as a young man. She taught him that love is not about control or competition, but about partnership and emotional balance. Even though their marriage didn't survive, the lesson stayed with him for life. One of the most painful truths Lee shared was the memory of a night years after Farrah passed away, when he sat alone watching one of her interviews. In the interview, she was smiling, glowing, and speaking about life with her usual mix of honesty and sweetness. But when the interviewer asked her about her struggles in Hollywood and her personal battles, Farrah's eyes shifted slightly, revealing a deep vulnerability that touched Lee's heart. In that moment, he broke down. He realized he had misunderstood her pain during their marriage. He had always seen her as strong, beautiful, and full of life, but he now understood that she had been carrying silent burdens he never took the time to fully notice. It was a truth that hurt him more than anything else, knowing he had loved her, yet failed to see how deeply she needed emotional support. Lee also confessed that the older he got, the more he wished he could go back and speak to his younger self. He wishes he could tell that version of himself to slow down, to listen carefully, to appreciate the woman standing beside him, and stop worrying so much about protecting his image. He wishes he could tell himself that love is rare and fragile, and that someone like Farrah Fawcett does not come into your life twice. He believes he would have made different choices if he had understood these things earlier. In the end, Lee Majors said the truth that remains with him at age 86 is simple but heartbreaking. Farrah Fawcett was the greatest what-if of his life. What if he had been more patient? What if he had communicated more? What if he had supported her dreams instead of fearing them? These questions still follow him, even after all these years. He knows he cannot change the past, but he carries Farrah's memory with a mixture of love, regret, and gratitude, grateful that he once had her, regretful that he lost her, and forever aware that she shaped him into a better man. I end this next part of the story. We look more closely at how small daily choices can slowly shape a person's life. even when those choices seem simple or unimportant at the time. Many people believe that change only happens through big events or dramatic moments, but the truth is that real change usually begins quietly in the background, without any loud announcement. It starts with a thought, then a feeling, then a choice, and then a habit. In the same way, the person in this story was not trying to make a big transformation or prove anything to anyone. They were simply trying to understand themselves better, one thought at a time, one step at a time. They had lived a large part of their life, following rules that others gave them. These rules came from family, school, society, and even from people who meant well, but did not fully understand who they were inside. Following these rules did not always harm them, but also did not help them discover their true voice. Because of this, they often felt like they were living in a room full of noise and expectations, unable to hear their own thoughts clearly. But something slowly changed as they grew older. They started spending more time alone, not in sadness, but in calm reflection. They began to question why they reacted a certain way, why they believed certain things, and why they carried fears that did not belong to them. They realized that understanding themselves was not about breaking rules just for the sake of it, nor was it about following rules blindly. It was about knowing which rules mattered to them personally. Once they understood this, they stopped trying to copy what others were doing and instead focused on what felt real, simple, and honest. Some days, this self-discovery felt easy and peaceful. Other days, it felt confusing and heavy. But the important thing was that they kept moving. They learned to treat themselves with kindness, especially on days when they did not feel strong. They learned it was okay to make mistakes because mistakes were signs of growth, not signs of failure. They learned to let go of people who drained their energy, even if saying goodbye was painful. And they learned to welcome people who supported their journey, even if those people came unexpectedly. Slowly, their thoughts became clearer. Their choices became wiser. Their confidence grew quietly, like a seed turning into a small plant. They did not need to shout or prove anything. They simply lived in a more honest way. And because of that, their life began to feel lighter. This new sense of clarity gave them the courage to try new things, explore new ideas, and speak more openly. It allowed them to enjoy simple moments like sitting with a cup of tea, walking in nature, or listening to music that touched their heart. They realized that life did not have to be complicated to be meaningful. It only needed to be true. And as they continued this journey of understanding themselves, they discovered that the most powerful thing in life is not perfection, but awareness. The awareness of who you are, what you value, and how you want to live. With each passing day, this awareness shaped their future in a gentle but steady way, helping them create a life that finally felt like their own. Another important truth that emerges from life's journey is how relationships, both past and present, influence the person we become. Often, we focus so much on the people who hurt us or disappointed us that we forget about the lessons those experiences bring. Every connection, every friendship, every romantic relationship carries some kind of wisdom if we pay attention. In this story, the person learned that even relationships that end painfully are not failures. They are teachers. At first, it can feel unbearable to face loss or betrayal. The mind often tries to replay moments over and over, asking why, or what if. These questions feel heavy, and it can seem impossible to move forward. But the key is not in finding a perfect answer. The key is in understanding what the experience taught you about yourself. By observing our feelings, thoughts, and reactions, we start to see patterns we could not notice before. Maybe we see that we gave too much of ourselves without asking for the same in return. Or maybe we noticed that we ignored small warning signs because we were too hopeful. Recognizing these patterns is not about blaming yourself or others. It is about gaining clarity so that future choices become wiser. The person in this story realized that by reflecting on past relationships, they could finally understand what love, respect, and trust really mean to them. This understanding allowed them to be more present in new relationships, to communicate honestly, and to set healthy boundaries. They learned that it is not weakness to walk away from someone who does not value you. It is strength. They also realized that forgiveness does not mean forgetting, nor does it mean return to someone who caused pain. Forgiveness is a quiet way to release the weight from your heart, so you can move forward with peace. Over time, the person became more comfortable being alone, understanding that solitude is not loneliness when used to learn, grow, and reflect. They discovered that people who truly matter will always align with your life naturally, without forcing, manipulating, or compromising your core values. This insight transformed their approach to friendships, partnerships, and even casual acquaintances. They began to cherish authenticity above all else, noticing that a single honest connection was worth more than dozens of superficial ones. Slowly, life began to feel less like a series of struggles and more like a careful, intentional unfolding of experience. Each new day became an opportunity to practice kindness, patience, and awareness. The person no longer feared mistakes because they understood that each mistake carried a hidden lesson. They also stopped chasing validation from others and started trusting their inner voice. By embracing this approach, they found that emotional freedom is possible. The freedom to love fully, to speak openly, to act boldly, and to make choices without fear of judgment became a quiet but profound part of their daily life. And even when life presented challenges or setbacks, they were able to approach them with calm clarity. This is the way true growth happens. Slowly, patiently, and often quietly, but with a lasting effect that shapes every decision, every relationship, and every moment of a person's life. One of the most powerful lessons in life, as the story shows, is that healing and self-discovery are not linear. People often expect that once something painful happens, it should be resolved quickly, like turning a page in a book. But real healing takes time, patience, and repeated effort. The person in this story learned that emotions do not follow schedules, and memories do not fade on command. Some days, the past felt close, raw, and overwhelming, while on others, it seemed distant and manageable. They realized that trying to force closure or rush the process only created frustration and self-blame. Instead, they learned to accept that healing is gradual. They allowed themselves to feel sadness without judgment, anger without shame, and confusion without panic. They discovered that acknowledging emotions honestly, rather than pushing them away, is the first step toward true freedom. Another important discovery was that self-reflection is not always comfortable. Looking inward often reveals parts of ourselves we do not like or understand. The person realized that they had spent years reacting automatically, following patterns learned from childhood, society, or past relationships, without ever asking why. By patiently examining their own behavior and motivations, they uncovered habits that no longer served them, ways of thinking that limited their happiness or kept them stuck in repetitive cycles. At first, this was uncomfortable, even painful, but gradually it became empowering. They understood that recognizing these patterns gave them the power to make new choices, instead of being controlled by the past. In addition to self-reflection, the person learned the value of small, consistent actions. Growth is not always about grand gestures or dramatic breakthroughs. Often, it is about the little things, pausing before reacting, offering kindness without expectation, speaking your truth gently, and setting boundaries when necessary. These small choices accumulate over time, shaping a life that aligns with personal values and inner truth. Another realization was the importance of patience with oneself. They understood that it is unrealistic to expect perfection or immediate results. Mistakes are part of the learning process, and self-compassion is essential. By giving themselves permission to fail, reflect, and try again, they created space for sustainable growth. Importantly, the person also noticed that their perspective on relationships changed. They became more mindful of who they allowed into their life, understanding that not everyone deserves unlimited access to one's energy or trust. They learned to value quality over quantity and authenticity over appearances. By applying these lessons consistently, they slowly built a life that felt more balanced, peaceful, and meaningful. Emotional resilience became their guide, helping them navigate challenges without losing sight of their goals or inner peace. Ultimately, the story reveals that self-discovery and healing are ongoing processes. There is no final destination, only a journey of understanding oneself, valuing meaningful connections, and living in alignment with one's deepest truths. Each choice, each reflection, and each moment of patience contributes to the person becoming the version of themselves they were always capable of being. Another important part of this journey is learning how to let go of attachments that no longer serve us. The person in this story realized that holding on to the past, to regrets, or to relationships that cause pain only keeps the heart heavy and the mind restless. At first, letting go felt impossible. They worried that releasing certain people, memories, or expectations meant forgetting, betraying, or giving up. But over time, they understood that letting go is not about erasing the past. It is about freeing yourself to live fully in the present. They noticed that many struggles in life arise from resisting reality or clinging to what cannot be controlled. By practicing acceptance, they learned to release these unnecessary burdens. This did not happen overnight. It was a process of small daily decisions. Choosing not to dwell on arguments, deciding to stop replaying mistakes, and reminding themselves that life is about growth, not punishment. Alongside letting go, they also learned to embrace gratitude. Gratitude became a powerful tool for shifting perspective. Instead of focusing on what went wrong, they began to notice the moments of kindness, love, and support that had always been present, even during difficult times. They started keeping track of small victories, simple joys, and the people who made life richer. This shift in mindset slowly transformed their emotional state, making them calmer, more resilient, and more capable of handling life's inevitable challenges. Another lesson was learning to communicate clearly and honestly. They realized that misunderstandings and hurt feelings often arise from unspoken words or assumptions. By expressing thoughts, feelings, and boundaries openly, they reduced conflict and strengthened their relationships. They also learned that communication is not about winning or proving a point. It is about understanding, connection, and mutual respect. They applied these lessons not only to romantic relationships, but also to friendships, family connections, and professional interactions. Another insight was the importance of balance.